mercy, what we find is that the vastness of His mercy puts precedence on His mercy over His anger. And this is based on Allah's statement when He said in a number of places in the Quran describing Himself settling on the throne, He said, Ar-Rahman&ArR-aheem, for example in Surah Taha, verse 5. The most merciful is established on His throne. Allah brings together two attributes or two qualities. One, the throne, it's not an attribute of Allah, but it is an attribute of His creation. One of the parts of His creation, which He has made the vastest and the greatest of His creation. So much so that the Prophet ﷺ had said, describing the whole of creation in relationship to the footstool which is less than the throne. The Prophet ﷺ said that the whole of creation, the whole universe, everything that exists, in relationship to the footstool, is like a brass ring thrown in the middle of a boundless desert. A vast desert. As it falls, it is invisible, you can't even see it. And the footstool, in relationship to Allah's throne, is also like a brass ring thrown into a boundless desert. So what are we talking about here in terms of the throne? The vastness of the throne is incomprehensible. It is the greatest part of Allah's creation. So Allah, in these verses where He talks about establishing Himself on His throne, being established on the throne, settling on the throne, He uses, on one hand, the biggest and greatest aspect of His creation, and then He describes Himself as Ar-Rahman. Ar-Rahman&ArR-aheem. He uses His greatest attribute, which is most all-inclusive and comprehensive, Ar-Rahman. His mercy, which covers everything. So when He put these two things together, talking about the vastness of His throne, which sits over all of His creation, and then combines that with His mercy, He is emphasizing to us that the dominion, which is His, in its vastness, is encompassed by His mercy in its totality. There is no aspect of that creation, the creation in which we live, that is not touched by the mercy of Allah. That is how vast it is. This is what we're talking about. Now, not only does Allah inform us that, but He takes a step further. And based on the implications of that relationship, Him being the most merciful, the all-merciful, all-inclusive in His mercy, which covers the whole of His dominion, He writes for Himself, He records for Himself that mercy would be an obligation on Himself, stressing precedence given to mercy. So He said in Surah Al-An'am, 6th chapter, verse 54, كَتَبَ رَبُّكُمْ عَلَى نَفْسِهِ الرَّحْمَةِ. Your Lord has ordained on Himself mercy. He has ordained it on Himself. Why? Because no one could make it obligatory on Allah. No one can command Allah to do anything, nor can anyone prevent Him from doing anything. No one can prevent Him. So, the precedence given to His mercy this is by His own choice. He chooses to give precedence to it over all else, and in particular over His anger, because that's the opposite. His mercy, He's merciful, and He's angry, upset with whatever is done against His commands, which He permits, because of course we cannot do anything without Him allowing us to do it. But Prophet Muhammad ﷺ elaborated on this verse. Your Lord has ordained on Himself mercy. Kataba rabbukum ala nafsihi rahmah. He said, as narrated by Abu Huraira, when Allah created the creation, He wrote in His book, obliging Himself, indeed, my mercy will conquer my anger, and it is placed near Him on the throne. Indeed, my mercy will conquer my anger, and it was placed with Him on the throne. So, Allah has obliged Himself, made an obligation on Himself that His mercy would precede His anger. That is an expression of the vastness of His mercy. So, somebody could then ask, as they do ask, if that is the case, why does His mercy, Allah's mercy, not cause Him to release the doomed souls from hell? Doesn't those souls who are going to be in hell forever, burning in hell forever, isn't that indicative that His anger, in this case, precedes or conquers His mercy? That is a question which is commonly asked. And it's something worth reflecting on. Why? Is Allah's mercy only limited to a certain area or a certain group or whatever? Well, in this sense, yes. His mercy does include people who end up in hell, because He does remove from hell some people who are doomed there. There's a narration from the Prophet ﷺ, which was collected by Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, in which he said that Allah, after the angels had interceded, and the messengers had interceded, and the believers had interceded, and no one remained to intercede, except the most merciful of the merciful, He will then take a handful from the fire and bring out of it people who never did any good, and who had been turned into charcoal, and cast them into a river called the river of life, on the outskirts of paradise. They will sprout as seeds from the silt carried by the flood. This is the promise of the Prophet. So Allah's mercy even reaches the inhabitants of hell. Anyway, dear viewers, we're going to stop here and continue in our next episode. We'll continue to look at this idea because it does need a little more reflection to answer this particular question. But fundamentally, Allah's mercy, as He said, encompasses everything, and it precedes His anger. And this is the greatness of those divine names, Ar-Rahman&ArR-aheem. With that, dear viewers, I bid you all farewell, and I hope to see you in our next episode. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
When you are weak and the road seems long, remember, just remember, seek strength from the strong.